So what exactly is a constitution? It's so much more than just a dusty legal document. You can think of it as the foundational blueprint for an entire nation. In this explainer, we're going to break down the true meaning and the really profound significance of the Constitution, what makes it the ultimate law of the land.
Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the fundamentals, defining what a constitution actually is. Then we'll explore why it's considered the supreme law and dig into this powerful idea called constitutionalism, which is all about limiting government power. We'll also see these principles in action with some real-world examples. After that, we'll get into the really crucial concept of the basic structure, the part of the Constitution that is essentially untouchable. And to wrap it all up, we'll do a quick review of all the core concepts.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1. To really grasp the Constitution's power, we have to start with its formal definition. We need to look at what legal scholars say are its most authoritative and foundational meanings.
According to the esteemed legal scholar V.N. Shukla, a constitution is, in essence, the master rulebook. It's what sets up the government's entire structure, it decides who gets what power, the courts, the parliament, the executive branch, and it lays down the fundamental principles for how that power is supposed to be used. It really is the blueprint for governance.
Now, MP Jain adds another critical layer to this. He defines constitutional law as the fundamental law that does two very important things at the same time. It acts as a restraint on the government to prevent it from overreaching, and it serves as a shield to protect the rights of every single individual. This dual role is precisely what makes it so incredibly powerful. So, if we set aside all the formal legal language for a moment, you can think of the Constitution simply as the mother of all laws. It's a pretty fitting term, right? Just like a mother might set the rules for a household, the Constitution sets the rules for the entire country. It literally creates the government and then tells it exactly what it can do and, maybe even more importantly, what it cannot do. This is what ensures that nobody, not even the most powerful leader, is above the law. And that idea, that no one is above the law, brings us perfectly into our second section, the principle of supremacy. Here, we're going to unpack why the Constitution holds this unique and unrivaled authority over everything else. There's a wonderful legal maxim for this concept, Lex Superior. It's Latin, and it simply means the higher law. This is a foundational principle that places the Constitution at the very peak of the legal pyramid. So let's say Parliament passes a new law, but that law violates a right guaranteed in the Constitution. Which one wins? Well, the Constitution wins, every single time. The conflicting ordinary law is struck down and considered void. So what exactly gives the Constitution this supreme power? Well, it boils down to four essential elements. First, its supremacy is inherent. It's just recognized as the highest legal authority there is. Second, it provides the framework, the very architecture that creates our institutions of government. Third, it offers protection, acting as that crucial barrier to safeguard our individual liberties from state overreach. And finally, it provides stability, a permanent set of rules that ensures consistent governance and can't just be changed on a whim.
Now, the fact that the Constitution is supreme naturally leads us to our third key concept, constitutionalism. And this is a subtle but important point. It's not just about having a constitution. It's about embracing the principle that the government must be limited by that constitution.
You have to understand, historically, this was a truly revolutionary idea. For centuries, most of the world operated under the principle that the king could do no wrong, meaning whatever the ruler decided was, by definition, the law. The rise of constitutionalism completely flipped that idea on its head. It established a brand new order where the law is the king. For the first time, power itself was subject to the law, not the other way around. Constitutionalism really rests on two main pillars. The first, as we've discussed, is limited government. It's the central idea that power must have boundaries to prevent it from sliding into tyranny. But the second is just as important, the idea of a living document. You see, a constitution isn't meant to be a static relic frozen in time. It's designed to be organic, to breathe, to grow, and to adapt to new societal challenges, all while preserving its fundamental core values.
Okay, so we've talked about these principles in a rather abstract way. But what do they actually look like in the real world? In Section 4, we're going to see the Constitution in action with a couple of practical illustrations.
Here are two fantastic examples. First, an administrative scenario. Imagine a state government passes an order saying that only people born in that state can get government jobs. Well, the Supreme Court can step in and strike that order down because it directly violates Article 16 of the Constitution, which guarantees equality of opportunity. Now, for a judicial scenario, what if the President and the Prime Minister have a major disagreement about their respective powers? They don't just have a political fight. They turn to the Constitution, whose articles on the distribution of powers provide the definitive, binding resolution. It's the ultimate rulebook for the government itself.
But all of this raises a huge question. If the Constitution is the supreme law, what stops a powerful parliament from just amending the Constitution to give itself unlimited power? This brings us to Section 5 and what is arguably one of the most important concepts in Indian constitutional law, the unalterable basic structure. This was the exact question that eventually came before the Supreme Court. Is the power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution absolute? Is it unlimited? Could they, in theory, change anything they want, even abolishing fundamental rights? This question set the stage for one of the greatest legal battles in the country's history. That battle was fought in the landmark 1973 case of Kesavananda versus the state of Kerala. The stakes were so incredibly high that the Supreme Court convened its largest ever bench of 13 judges to hear the case. The challenge was against several constitutional amendments that had been passed to grant Parliament seemingly unlimited power to amend the Constitution. The central issue was that simple but profound question: is Parliament's amending power absolute? And the Supreme Court's judgment was nothing short of historic. The core of their ruling, what we call the ratio decidendi, was this: Parliament does have the power to amend the Constitution, but it cannot alter, damage, or destroy its basic structure. This ruling created a new, powerful limitation. The court essentially said that certain core features, like democracy, secularism, and the rule of law, are so fundamental to the Constitution's very identity that they are beyond the reach of Parliament's amending power.
So, with that major concept in place, let's bring everything together in our final section. This will be a quick review to help consolidate all of the key ideas we have covered.
This chart really summarizes the entire system beautifully. It all starts with Step 1, the people of India, who are the ultimate source of all sovereign power. In Step 2, the people give to themselves the Constitution, which serves as the fundamental law. In Step 3, the Constitution then creates the three organs of government to exercise power on behalf of the people. And the final outcome, in Step 4, is a system of limited government where the rights of citizens are protected. It's a perfect circle of power, flowing from the people and back to them. All right, let's do a rapid-fire revision. The nature of the Constitution? It's the Grundnorm, the supreme law. Our authoritative sources? Remember the definitions from V.N. Shukla and M.P. Jain. The key concept to take away? Constitutionalism, which means limited government. The landmark case you must remember? Kesavananda Bharati from 1973, which gave us the Basic Structure Doctrine. And finally, the legal maxim? Lex Superior, the higher law. And that brings us to one final, thought-provoking question to leave you with. We've established that the Constitution is a living document, meant to evolve. So who should be the primary guide of that evolution? Should it be the judiciary, interpreting its meaning for modern times? Or should it be the legislature, amending it based on the will of the people? Finding the proper balance between those two forces. That is the great, ongoing challenge at the very heart of constitutional law. Something for you to ponder.